Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second online talk at the GBS Summer Summit. The topic today is a very interesting one. It's opportunities of big data and digitalization for innovative drugs and medical devices. As all of you know, the connectivity between diagnostics, drugs, devices, data becomes more and more obvious. And we have a speaker today who is, from my personal point of view, one of the best, if not the best, experts in this area. It's Professor Broich from the Federal Institute for Drugs and Medical Devices in Bonn. Professor Broich is a physician from his background. He has a lot of practical experience in the field of medicine, but after his practical activities, he joined the Federal Institutes for Drugs and Medical Devices. He became its vice president, and since 2014, he is president of the BfArM. He is not only active in the German environment, but also in the European environment, including the European Network of Regulatory Authorities, the European Medicine Agencies Management Board. He is chair of the European Telematics Management Board and in the CNS Working Party at the EMA. From my point of view, or in other words, and in a nutshell, he is the perfect speaker about the topic you have today on your agenda. Again, the request to all of you, if you should have questions, if you should have comments, please use the Q&As button, which is on the bottom of your screen. And we will try to respond to all questions and comments you might have. And now I want to hand over to Professor Broich. The floor is yours. We are looking forward for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much for the nice introduction. It's a great pleasure for me to be today with you and to present some of our recent developments, particularly how we deal with big data and digitalization and what we expect in the future, particularly with regard to pharma and medical devices. So I have to check now that I can move. Okay. So what I like to discuss with you today, with the digitalization, we will see a changing in our ecosystem in the whole healthcare system. And I think this will influence development of new pharmaceuticals and medical devices as well. So big data, real world evidence, artificial intelligence have all big words with it. There are chances, there are challenges, and particularly for our regulatory decision making, we are discussing now the opportunities and chances. So this has not only aspects for our national decision making, but on the European level as well. And as an example how fast some developments can be, I will present on the fast track for digital therapeutics, where we've in 1 year from the first draft of legal aspects now start with the first digital applications. So there are a lot of changes to our current healthcare system underway, and the medical apps are one small aspect. There are big data, real world data, but this is influencing, for instance, registries as well. We are working as BfArM on interoperability as well, with the integration of the DIMD from Cologne earlier this year. We are now responsible for the OPS codes, for instance, in clinical medicine, or for the ICD classification system. And here we are working with e-health records on the interoperability of all these clinical data, which will come into the routine care for patients, but will come into the clinical trials development in the future as well. So I will focus today particularly on the pharma and medical devices system. However, since many years, even Big Pharma is expecting a real change, and they are speaking about disruptive developments are coming up. And this is now from a presentation from Ernst & Young a few years ago, where they state that the blockbuster model is dead, that we all know since many years. However, the new Pharma4 setting is that we have a complete new ecosystem with the patient in the middle, but there will be a combination of pharmaceuticals, medical devices, smart applications, medical apps, and so on. And they all work together in clinical trials, in the development, thereafter in the monitoring, in the vigilance systems, and so on. And this is taken up by the public as well. This is from the last year in the Handelsblatt, a special series of articles. Today there was an insert in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung with several pages on digitalization. And it all comes down how have we handle big data, artificial intelligence in the future, and how will this influence efficient drug discovery and development? Of course, it will improve diagnostic procedures, and particularly the apps will help to monitor patients even better in the future. Applications for big data and algorithms are wide, so we can optimize our healthcare systems. We will learn particularly about rare diseases. We will learn in research more on the complexity and mechanisms of disease to find new mechanisms for therapeutics. And I already mentioned the better monitoring. However, we are on our way to stratification for treatment opportunities to get to a more personalized prevention and prediction, but to a personalized treatment then as well. And so we hope in the end that patient care and the individual prognosis can be much more improved than it is today. So we have a lot of big data available. I think what we have to do is to bring it together that we can use them. So we're all aware on imaging data, how important they are for treatment developments, for instance, in ischemic stroke or in Alzheimer's disease, there is a big role. We have all the genomic data and the predictive value in some oncologic disorders. We learn a lot of proteomics and metabolomics currently. We have the clinical databases, and here in the future we need a better recruitment of all these data, and we have to increase the interoperability not only on the German but also on the European level. And there will be additional data coming in from all these developments with smartphones, the medical apps and portables which are available. And we need better tools to screen the literature, to find new treatment options in the future, which then can be developed then with all these tools and data available in addition. Therefore, we started a task force for big data with the European Medicines Agency and the European Network of Regulatory Agencies. So we presented this in 2019 in a big summary report. There's now an update available on the EMA website. What we like to do with our regulation, how we will translate that in the future. And we defined 10 priority recommendations how to use the big data. And I think here we work together then with the academic medicine with pharmaceutical industry to find the best ways how to operate with these skills and opportunities. However, you may well aware that a lot of things are already underway. So there are challenges to recruitment, design, execution, inspections, and assessment of clinical trials. Here's some examples how this will influence clinical trials. So we have a lot of virtual control arms now going underway. There are many discussions, virtual inspections on clinical trial science, for instance, now in the pandemic situation, are discussed in the regulatory field a lot. And here one example, Flatiron is a US company which has been bought by Roche 2 years ago for $2 billion. And what they have in mind is that Flatiron is sampling patient-level clinical data from real-world clinical outcomes in large data sets from big hospitals, and they are bringing that together with a company with genomic data available and advanced analysis tools for this. And from these databases, they model the outcome for a special patient and treatment options for the real world. And they have already today more than 30,000 cancer patients in this database. And here you can see an example how they model what tumor mutation burden predicts for the time to progression on nivolumab. And they made another example with the modulation or a modulation of a virtual control arm. You can see here from Flatiron based on their real world evidence. And the important thing is in this clinical trial, they have been able to show that the virtual control group arm is very similar to the real clinical trial control arm. So they are very similar together. And so many companies are now looking for these possibilities based on real world data to define control groups. And we see that, I think, even more often in the future. And that is one of the reasons that the BfArM is part of the Harmony initiative. This is part of the Innovative Medicine initiative of the European Commission. And here academia, pharmaceutical industry, and regulators are working together, particularly on such big data and real world evidence approaches. But we have to do that at the BfArM for medical devices as well. So or many of you will be aware that in the field of medical devices, the BfArM is responsible not for assessment of the medical devices for their CE certification. This is done by the notified bodies. However, the incidence management of the medical devices, this is done by our BfArM experts. And what we are getting in incidence is more than 25,000 a year in free text. And this is the berühmte Nadel im Heuhaufen, as we say in German. And so that was a lot of resources looking to these free text notifications to the BfArM. So we developed a text mining tool and developed this together with the machine learning tools and with a new artificial intelligence calculator on a cognitive computer system. So we have been able now for the future to see and to cluster these incidents sent to the BfArM, and we can now look for severity or for the a number of incidents and can find then, is it a software issue or is it an output issue, false reading from the device, insulin therapy in these devices with insulin pumps, for instance, and even others, alarm issues we have seen with ventilators that way. So we are much faster now to define clusters of these incidents and to act more concrete. One research application which is underway is GIGA for Health now. So BfArM is part of this initiative by the North Rhine-Westphalia Landesregierung, together with the university campus in Düsseldorf, Vodafone, and academic centers. We will develop and evaluate a novel app for medical device incidents online using the new 5G technology. So if there is an incident on an intensive care unit or some of the medical devices, an MRI unit, something like that, has an incident, this will go online to the BfArM, and then we can see, is there regulatory action necessary or not? Another important field is the research data center with the DIMDI from Cologne, now part of the BfArM. We are authorizing these database from the National Health Statutory Insurance Companies, and here more than 70 million persons' data are sampled, and we can use these data then for health research from academia to improve then the health service research. I already mentioned that interoperability for classification systems is extremely important. So we are here working on the interoperability of the OPS codes. We are now working together with the Medicine Informatics initiative here in Germany, using, for instance, the SNOMED system, so that we can then translate current developments to patient care. And final app on prescriptions. Later in this afternoon, we will have a large international workshop providing there the German fast track procedure. And what is in it? We started very early discussing digital therapeutics from medical devices, which new possibilities will bring that for information, diagnosis, and therapy. And you all know about these tools with the smartphones and others. And a real challenge for us as regulators has been as well, for instance, the Apple Research Kit, which started in 2015. And important is that within 24 hours, they have been able for a cardiovascular study, more than 11,000 participants, for Parkinson profile, Empower, 5,600 patients, and so on. And based on this experience, now, many academic centers and even pharmaceutical companies are using the Apple Research Kit as a platform. The possibilities, and now, for instance, my heart counts in the version 3.0 was started last year, and there are several clinical trials now planned within this platform. And in one clinical trial, more than 5,000 participants are now in randomization, and they have been recruited in a few weeks. And that is a real challenge, how we do clinical trials in most of the cases still today. Here, postpartum depression, rare disease, but now, since it launched 2 years ago, more than 17,000 participants in these Mom Genes Find platform, and we learned a lot. The Parkinson application is increasing, and a lot of other diseases are coming up now, autism, epilepsy, diabetes, of course. This is particularly interesting for chronic disorders. And so it's no wonder that disorders like major depression are coming in, or tinnitus as well. And in the end, this will help us a lot to improve the health services research and daily care for patients. Of course, there's a backside. There are new challenges and risks as well. And insulin dosage, for instance, we have seen a lot of then applications which made a false dosage calculation, which sets patients then at risk. So this must be addressed. Cybersecurity is a big problem, and you learned about several hospitals last week. The university campus in Düsseldorf suffered from a cybersecurity attack and was down for many hours. And therefore, we are working very closely together with the Federal Office for Information Security here in Bonn and the Federal Commissioner for Data Protection and Freedom of Information as well. And if we are now looking to medical apps or digital health applications, it is very important to see where data are not only generated, but where the data are going to, and particularly with the court decision on the privacy shield, for instance, every app sending data to the US cannot allowed by the BfArM in the future. So we are here doing a lot then with the applicants to come here to solutions. So digital medical devices are not a new topic for us. Shortly after I took the presidency at the BfArM, I realized that this is a hot topic for us as regulators as well. And then we started in 2014 with guidance documents. When is such a tool simple medical app? Is it a medical device? Or is it simply a lifestyle tool? This is very important. And then we did several dialogue sessions with industry, with academia, with data protection and security managers. We talked about possibility of reimbursement and so on. And we founded in 2017 a so-called innovation office here at the BfArM to foster particularly support and advice and project guidelines to these new upcoming startups who dealt with these digital medical devices. Then we published our experience in the Bundesgesundheitsblatt in a special issue. But then end of last year, the Bundestag decided in a new legislation. And so this new legislation is now in place. And by the end of this month, I think we will then recommend the first medical app or digital therapeutic then for prescription by physicians. So this is really a new era for these digital devices, app on prescription in a fast track procedure. And then for the patients, it will be reimbursed. So this is the only place in the world, and there's a high interest how our experience is here. So we have to wait for applicants who submit their application then to the BfArM, then we can discuss that. And then we check the quality, for instance, data security, quality, and so on. And then we look for positive care effects. They can be small or bigger, and depending on this, we are requiring clinical data. This can go up to a randomized controlled trial, but is no pre-requirement to have always a randomized controlled trial for these data available. If there is sufficient evidence, you, with a plausible justification, then you can admit to this DIGA directory in the social security legislation. If your data are only preliminary or not accepted as final by us, then you can go for test phase for 1 year. And thereafter, you have to provide then further data, and we can then reject or cancel, or you can go to the final then and permanent reimbursement on this list. So we are not involved in the price negotiations. So overall, this looks a little bit very similar to the MNOC procedure for pharmaceuticals. Based on this experience, we have set up with the politicians and the ministry these system, and I'm looking forward to how successful it will be. One very important factor is that we are proactive here and give advice to these DIGA guidance and for the directory, so that everybody knows what we expect and what he has to do for a successful application. So that we have a complex framework today for a high quality and secure supply, even with digital therapeutics, but we have to discuss where do we want to go in the future, how fast and how far. And here we are working with academia, with pharmaceutical companies, with device companies, with politicians, with healthcare professionals, and so on. So what we need is safe and pragmatic digital medical apps which help in the healthcare situation. We need to collect in a stratified and structured manner that we can use then real world and big data approaches. We can then make faster and more effective decisions on a benefit risk, for instance. And we have to look for new tools and how we can use, for instance, artificial intelligence, particularly in the subsets of machine learning tools, even today in clinical trial and development. In the end, this all centers on the patient, and we need better diagnostics and monitoring. We need new, more and better treatment options. We will find new supportive care models with these digital developments. And in the end, the treatment for patients will be safer, will be better, and will be faster at the patient. And with that, I close and will be open for questions and the discussion. Thank you very much.
So, Professor Broich, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation and the insights you've given. Dear audience, I hope you have enjoyed the presentation as much as I did. My name is Susanne Krieger, and I am the Program Manager of the Pharma MBA program at Goethe Business School. I'm happy to take your questions now for our online discussions, and so please feel free to use the Q&A button here in Zoom, and we will start with our first question from Janos. Actually, it's a comment and also a question. Thank you for your super overview on the ministry's activities on the field of surveying and managing regulatory tasks with big data and AI utilization. This seems to be very progressive. The coronavirus pandemic showed us that to believe in the usefulness of digital technology is not enough to prevent a pandemic. Still, exponential explosion of available data in the next 5 years combined with quantum computing power will show what it can do on the field of improving healthcare and prevent diseases. Could you please elaborate on the Institute's plans for the next 5 years, how it will cope with the explosion of real-world data, clinical study reports, and how it supports the standardization in RWE studies?
Yeah, thank you very much for this comment and question. At the BfArM, we have a special division for research, and this is unique even within the regulatory agencies here in Europe. And this is as well true for the Paul-Ehrlich Institute in Langen, close to Frankfurt. So we are working very closely together. Particularly at the BfArM have now the possibility that we have the research data center available, where academia can make their health service research. However, we have a special computational service at our institution as well, using artificial intelligence, cognitive computing, and we are working there together with Fraunhofer institutions, for instance, to develop then the right algorithms, but to study as well when the algorithm is eventually going to the wrong direction. So when they are self-learning on the data, in big data approaches. So this is one of the biggest challenges for us for the next years, but we are very keen to work on these approaches together with these institutions to improve our regulatory decision making. And particularly, you mentioned the pandemic situation, all these questions. Is hydroxychloroquine helping in the pandemic situation? Or is it even devastating the situation for patients? Is remdesivir a good treatment option, or are there risks as well? And how to deal with the many data now from the vaccine trials? Here we need clearly new and faster approaches, and there we are working together, and particularly approaches, as I have shown with Flatiron from the US. I think these approaches we are discussing with pharmaceutical industry, with medical device industry now very closely to improve our system, but to interact faster than with these stakeholders as well, to improve the situation for clinical trials, recruitment, and so on.
Thank you. There is another question from an anonymous viewer. Thanks for your presentation. I have a question from the perspective of a pharma company bringing a medicinal product to the patient with regard to inspection of AI machine learning methods. AI machine learning have a huge potential to protect patients by ensuring to bring the right therapy to the right patient. In other words, reduce risks for patients and increase the benefit. However, no clear guidance are available from HAs on the usage of the computational methods, including the HA's expectation on its validation. Could you please share some information when guidance will be introduced?
Yeah, thank you for this question as well. And I think this is particularly what we are doing now in the big data task force, and the next steps are now in planning, and we have it's a work in progress now on the regulatory science strategy of EMA and the national competent authorities for the next 5 years. And this is one of the key topics, to develop guideline documents as we did up to now, for instance, then treatment in oncology needs inclusion, exclusion criteria, and we are trying to develop similar guidelines then for the use of such new techniques and approaches as well.
Thank you for that. Another question from Sebastian. I completely agree on your future vision. However, I believe we are still far from using the data to improve treatments. How do you want to decide who will have access to the data and who will therefore have the chance to improve treatments through them?
Yeah, particularly with regard to the German research data center now held by the BfArM, this is legally defined who will have access. I know that there's a lot of discussion going around that pharmaceutical companies, for instance, have no access to these statutory health data, but academia other regulatory agencies will have access. This discussion is going on, and I think it's our reputation at stake here that everybody has access to these data and that the data are better used than this has been declined in the past.
Thank you for that answer. Another one from René Fürtig. Thank you for this great presentation. How do you envision the placement of DTX in the treatment landscape of psychiatric disorders from a regulatory perspective?
Yeah, so from my earlier clinical profession, I'm a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist. So I'm looking particularly to the developments of these digital therapeutics and possibilities. For instance, in major depression, we see already many apps available which are reimbursed by health insurance companies directly. So the Technica, the AOK have such tools which they pay for to the applicants. I think we will see a lot in the future there. And that is what I mean with a complete ecosystem. So in the future, we will see not only a new antipsychotic or antidepressive drug, but we will see a system between the drug and how this may better interfere with such a medical app, which allows better monitoring of the symptoms of the patient, to address the therapeutic dosage, for instance, faster and better. There's a lot of things I can imagine for the future, particularly in psychiatry and neurology.
Thank you. Another question from anonymous viewer. How will digital initiatives in preventive care be reimbursed by payers if there is a RW proof of efficiency?
Well, in the reimbursement, BfArM is not involved primarily. However, we are discussing about the quality, which data might be required. So even here with the Federal Joint Committee, there's a very good established interaction to discuss such topics.
Thank you. A question from Sabine Ohlenbusch. Are big data analysis or other digital technologies implemented in the conception process of post-launch data collection, anwendungsbegleitende Datenerhebung, in patient registries, for instance, for synthetic control arms?
Yeah, these things are under development, as mentioned. So we never accepted that yet as regulators. So we made our decision-making process was always based on real clinical data, but the examples I showed you pinpoint that we may change in the future this attitude, and particularly with all these approaches. And even in rare diseases or the new highly expensive therapies coming into place now, that, for instance, the Federal Joint Committee can ask for further registries. I think there we will see such approaches in the future as well.
Thank you for that. Manuel Bierbert is asking, digital health apps are becoming the benefit of reimbursements. Would you follow this approach with apps potentially providing suggestions or even decide non-human based or non-human controlled?
Maybe he can a little bit elaborate on this, what he is. So I don't understand exactly what is meant.
Okay, so maybe Manuel, if you could be a little more detailed on your question and ask it again. Then we go over to the next question. Do you see an opportunity for sharing, trading health data on an individual level? So how can I share my personal health record for public research for free or sell it to a company if I am a needed candidate for clinical studies?
Yeah, we see that a lot in the US already. In the Apple Research Kit is one example where this is done together with academic center in the US, and even some European centers are working with the US together. So for instance, some universities from Scandinavia are working here with Mayo Clinic centers together in some applications. I think we will see that. And of course, we are discussing the so-called Datenspende here in Germany as well. So the Datenschutz, data protection is a big topic here in Germany, and particularly in academic research, pharmaceutical research, this is a burden and a hurdle, even more than in other European countries. So in Scandinavia, much more is possible in academic research than is here in Germany. And we are discussing now with the politicians, particularly in our council presidency now, how we can make data better available, even within Europe, not only in Germany, and to base this on the same standards. So maybe coming back here to Manuel, if it is meant that, for instance, in a closed loop system, for diabetes patients, that automatically an artificial intelligence-based algorithm is then setting the insulin dosage for this patient. I think here it is then extremely important that the algorithm is open and that we as regulators can check whether this is a correct attitude of this algorithm. And this is research we are doing now with some Fraunhofer institutions, how to check for such algorithms. Of course, BfArM in itself has not the experience and the experts to do this. So this is a learning process for us as well. And so we need this interaction with these specialized academic centers.
Okay, Manuel just added something. He means the example that an app will have some kind of autonomy if, for example, results are provided without a human running a quality check. Yes, exactly. Dosage by AI can be an example.
Yeah, so I think that is what we already discussed. We need a quality check within to know what's taking place.
Okay, then thank you. Another question. Flatiron is focusing on oncology. Do you know if Flatiron is approaching the European market? If yes, why was it not approved? If not, why not?
Well, I think this was a prototype and a pilot then by Flatiron. And as I mentioned, it has been bought by Roche, particularly for these opportunities in the future. And I think we will hear about this approach.
Thank you. Another question from Sabine Ohlenbusch. What timeline do you see for the harmonization of the EU health data space?
Well, difficult question. We see how difficult it is even here in Germany to improve interoperability. But I think we have now some very good examples. So I think it will not take so long as it did with harmonization of the pharmaceutical legislation and pharmaceutical approaches for the assessment, but it will take some years.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from the audience? So please feel free to take a minute and place them now in the Q&A function. I guess this was all the questions the audience had. Professor Broich, on behalf of the House of Pharma and Healthcare and the Goethe Business School, I would like to thank you very much for this presentation and for your time. And I hope you enjoyed it as well, being with us today. And to the audience, thank you for your attention and your interest and your participation. And if you liked our online session today, please feel free to take a look at our upcoming sessions for tomorrow and on Friday. And yeah, we're looking forward to welcoming you then too. So,
yeah, thank you very much from my side as well, and has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I hope to see you soon on campus. Bye-bye.